pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We do have a little bit of new business before we move on to the budget discussion. I need a motion to approve Abby Riley as the unpaid softball coach and Corey Mosier as an unpaid baseball coach for 2024-2025 school year, as recommended by the athletic coordinator and superintendent. I'll move.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Who moved? Sorry.
Jen.
And Song?
Do you need me to?
No, I'm good. I just missed that. I was doing my check. All right, so that completes the new business, and we will move on to the budget discussion.
Before Matt starts, I just want to thank this administrative team and the faculty for thinking outside the box, being flexible, being creative. As we know, building a budget in New York State for a public school is extremely difficult. There's a lot of uncertainty. There are funded mandates. There's lack of foundation aid. There's very limited revenue streams. And this group has been working tirelessly, looking at every option, trying to provide what's best for our kids, and being cognizant of the constraints that we were working under, and our staff. And our staff has been extremely flexible, understanding, and moving forward. They understand the constraints we're under. So I wanted to thank them. Matt particularly has been crunching numbers for weeks now. And, it's hard work, and it's difficult, and we have to make difficult decisions. So I just wanted to thank the people that have been involved, because it's not easy work. So with that.
Great. Thanks, Bill. I'm going to try to be pretty brief while I'm up here. I'm going to kind of paint the picture with where we're at, and then I'll turn it over to Bill to talk about more of the specifics with regard to programming, and then certainly the rest of the team is available here to answer any questions. If there's any questions about the budget, the process, things in general, I'm certainly happy to help in that sense. Some of this is going to be redundant to what we've talked about at some of the budget coffees, but I think it's important to reiterate and make sure we have an understanding of why we're talking about what we are. So, I'm glad Bill started to put this presentation together, and I'm glad this has kind of kicked things off. It's always a good reminder to me, for me, of why we're all here, what we're doing, what we're doing. And just know that our students are behind every decision we make. It's what drives all of our decision making. We have seen some big changes in our enrollment and our needs of our students over the last few years. It's not on the slide, but just in a general sense, our enrollment is declining. We kind of leveled off for about a 10-year stretch from about 2013 to 2023, but we are sort of on the decline again. If you go back to 2018-19, pre-K-12, we started the year with 571 kids. This current year, we're at 541 kids. If you go way back, and you look at a 20-year span, our enrollment's dropped about 20% over that 20-year span. So as recently as 05, 06 or so, we were up around 700 kids, and now we're down to about 540. Some interesting trends, though, with regard to our student population. Back 20 years ago or so, our economically disadvantaged population, using our free and reduced lunch figures, was in the 15 to 17% range. We're currently at about 30%, 30 to 32%. And that really increased from 05, 06 until 17, 18 or so, and then that's really leveled off. Our population of students with special needs through the CSE, either with an IEP or a 504 plan, was really level when the economically disadvantaged numbers were going up, and then has increased when the economically disadvantaged numbers have been leveled off, which I don't think is something you'd expect to see. There's usually a direct correlation. So that's something that's been unique for us, particularly in the last 5 to 10 years. So why am I telling you all this? Well, we currently have 170 students, and this is data that's coming from Kevin in his office, with either an IEP or a 504 plan. We currently have 11 students in this school year that are educated outside of this building in an alternative placement at an average cost of between $50,000 and $60,000 a student. In 22-23, so as recently as 2 years ago, we had 6 students, and total tuition or total program cost for those students of $315,000. So really in the last 2 years, that number's doubled. And then looking ahead to next year, we have the potential of 4 or 5 additional students in outside placements. Again, the total price tag or budgetary impact on those kids remains to be seen, depending on what placements are determined through Kevin's office in the CSC process. One other important note with regard to those students, all but one of those students is currently being educated at HCS this year. They have needs that are being addressed this year, but if they are educated outside of this building, it has an impact on staffing and the way resources are used in this building. So that becomes part of the equation when we start talking about how we utilize staffing in the building, and that Bill's going to get into that more specifically. In addition to special education, our career and technical education in the secondary, which is primarily 11th and 12th graders, but also 10th graders, has increased dramatically. We currently have 43 students, grades 10 through 12, that are enrolled in career and technical education at Madison and Ida BOCES. We're currently paying $350,000, so roughly $10,000 a student based on last year's numbers. Next year, they take a 3-year weighted average of your attendance and your enrollment, and that's how the billing or your share is determined through BOCES. Next year, that's going to increase to $385,000. So that's a direct budgetary impact of $35,000 increase for next year. Just for context, in 18-19, we had 14 kids, and we were paying $143,000. So these two figures, special ed and career technical education, this is great that we're able to do this for our students. These are kids that are in programs that they should be in, that they want to be in, and that they're benefiting from. However, it means they're either entirely out of the building, or they're out of the building for a portion of the day, and they're not being educated here at HCS. Despite meeting the needs of all of these students, which is wonderful, we still do so much here at HCS, okay? We have 8 advanced placement classes with 135 kids in seats. So it's not 135 individual students, that's seats in those classes. Again, for context, 10 years ago we had 5 and 74 kids enrolled in those classes. So we remind ourselves all the time that our mission is to educate every student every day. And I think when we look at what we've been able to establish here and really continue to provide is really special. This is unique. This is why we do what we do. This is why we're proud of what we've done, and why it is such a grind for us to continue to try to do that. So again, this is to sort of set the stage of where we're at. And so we're going to talk about program. And this slide is just meant as a brief exercise to sort of explain why we have to look at program. If you look at where the school dollar is spent, this is looking at the current budget year, so 24-25. Our total budget's around $15.6 million. Of that total budget amount, $6.8 million, a little over 43% is payroll. That's administrative, that's instructional, non-instructional support, any payroll item that's budgeted at $6.8 million. The employee benefits tied to that payroll figure for all the employees that are on our payroll and that qualify for benefits, $4.6 million. So when you combine those two, I'll refer to these two big pieces of the pie as our personnel costs. I think it's just over 73%, okay? Or over $11 million of our $15.6 million budget. So just hold on to that figure for a second. If we continue to look at where the dollars are spent, about $1.5 million of that $15.6 million, roughly 10%, is debt service. It's principal and interest payments on capital improvement projects that have been completed here, as well as bus purchases, financing for the purchase of school buses. This $1.5 million on an annual basis, all those principal and interest payments for those borrowings, are separately approved through voter authorization on separate referendum throughout the budget process in the last 10 years approximately. So this is kind of an untouchable slice of the pie. Really the only way to save here is if you have an opportunity to refinance depending on the market and interest rates. A lot of the school's debts are pooled together and we have municipal advisors that monitor that for us. That's not an opportunity we have for next year. So that's kind of an untouchable piece of the pie. The next sliver, kind of going clockwise here, is $1.2 million for what I would refer to as special programs. This $1.2 million are expenses tied to, if you think back on the previous slide, most of the costs associated with students with special needs that are not our personnel costs. So that does not include employees of Hamilton that are providing those services or that are directly tied to the instruction of these students. So this would include the tuition for these outside placements. It would include itinerant service providers from, let's say, BOCES that come in here to provide service for our students, the equipment, the materials, the supplies. For all intents and purposes, that's an untouchable sliver of the pie as well, okay? These are costs that have been determined to be necessary through Kevin's office for the appropriate education for these students. So, in essence, this $2.7 million are really untouchable pieces of the pie when we talk about the budget. So what does that leave us? That leaves us just under 10% or another $1.5 million of everything else. When I say everything else, anything that's not personnel related for salary and benefits, anything that's not principal and interest payments, anything that's not tied to special programs, it's everything from classroom supplies and materials to elevator maintenance, athletics, not counting coaching salaries, transportation, not counting principal and interest payments and driver salary and benefits, anything else. BOCES capital, BOCES rent, legal services, liability insurance. The point is, there's not a lot of places to go. There's not a lot of places to go within this sliver to recognize any significant savings. This green sliver, everything is costing more than it used to. Everything's going up. So when the question is asked or the curiosity arises of why do we always look at personnel, it is by far the biggest chunk of the pie. It's the one that actually we have the most flexibility with because of these other resources being tied up in the limited availability there. Any questions on that piece?
Can I just ask a quick question then?
Sure.
Does that, like summer school, like if we do summer curriculum projects, would that come out of, because we're paying teachers money, is that part of the 6.8 or the 1.5?
It's part of the 6.8.
Okay,
Yep.
just wondering.
So extended year programs that are established in the CSE would be
Got it.
part of special programs.
Got it.
If we do some kind of enrichment programs here at the school where we're paying our teachers, the personnel costs would be in
Got it.
here. Anything else would be in this sliver.
Okay.
Yep. Did I do that?
Base, double tap on that screen. It should be a full screen button on the bottom right.
All right, so as we're dealing with these escalating costs, what are our options for consideration? It's simple. We either increase our revenues or we reduce our expenses. So increasing our revenues, we've done a lot already. I'm standing here to tell you we've done, I'm comfortable saying all that we can do, anything of significance. Proposing a levy that exceeds the tax limit is certainly an option. It's on the table. It's not something that's been ruled out, and it's not something that we would shy away from if we feel that that's what's necessary to get to where we want to be. Many school districts are dipping into their reserves. We are in this current year, if you recall last year throughout this process, we came up with I'll call it a long-term plan of 4 years of utilizing our reserves to really bridge the gap with the expiration of the COVID relief funds in an effort to bridge the budget gap as costs continue to rise and other revenue sources may be limited. We're currently using $300,000 in this year. We're budgeted to tap into another $225,000 next year, and really $750,000 in reserves over the next 4 years to help bridge the budget gap. Could we use more reserves? We could. The plan that we came up with last year, that 4-year plan, would leave us with what I would say are comfortable amounts in those reserve funds. By utilizing more and tapping into more now, we're going to run out quicker. And when we stop utilizing those reserves will be depleted. So that's not something that I'm in a position to recommend at this point. As far as the tax cap and the tax levy goes, we meaning the school district, has had a tax levy, has had budgets adopted with corresponding tax levies that have been at or below our statutory limit in every year but one. The 1 year that this district had a tax cap override was a bit of an anomaly. Our calculated allowable levy that year was actually a decrease. The rate of inflation, which was the determining factor of everybody's baseline, was very low. We had some expiration of principal and interest payments from a previous capital project. So the local share of that debt was coming off the books, if you will, for the tax levy calculation. And that was a year that we went out with a positive increase, but our allowable was negative. Just a little historical context. I believe strongly that this district has been fiscally responsible for a number of years. Our tax levy in the last 18 years has gone up on average 3.21% a year. Our budget's gone up 2.64% a year. Our foundation aid from New York State's gone up 1.12% a year. So there's been a definite shift in our reliance on the tax levy and the need to fund more of our budget through the tax levy compared to foundation aid. Unfortunately, I don't think that trend's going to reverse itself. And we've talked about that at length based on declining enrollment, environmental factors in the community with property values, and our wealth relative to other districts in New York State. And then lastly, how do we reduce expenditures? Well, if you think back to that pie chart, that little green sliver, we look at everything. Unfortunately, things are getting more expensive. We're to the point where everything in that sliver are things that we feel we need to continue. So that leaves us with the biggest chunk, and that is personnel costs. The biggest chunk of the personnel costs is instructional personnel. With changing student needs, with students not being educated in the district, that coupled together gives us the biggest opportunity to consider efficiencies, get creative and look at how we do things. We'll continue to do that. Bill will talk a little bit about regionalization. And with that, I'll have Bill come up and talk a little bit more about specifics with regard to personnel. Any other questions quick before I sit with regard to
Presenting or
the general,
I can sit. if that's-
look, we're all looking
Turn
at
it
you.
on.
No,
I'm just gonna put it on this slide.
yeah, I can drive, yeah.
Move it to conversation. Or not, I guess.
So I want to talk a little bit about regionalization initiatives. You've heard me talk many times about New York State Education Department's push towards regionalization initiatives. And they have tasked the district superintendents of those things to come up with regionalization plans. And one of the tenets of that are component districts, especially the Route 20 corridor schools, Morrisville, Madison, Hamilton, and Morrisville. We have had discussions about aligning our master schedules to try to allow districts to collaborate better, to share services better, transportation, classes. For instance, if our neighbor doesn't have an AP class, those students could come to Hamilton and be a part of our AP classes. We could send students to another district. Special ed services, pooling of resources. So we are looking at all of those different services that we could potentially share down the road. And the first step would be the alignment of our master schedules to allow us to be able to do that. BOCES partnerships, transportation efficiencies, centralized purchasing and procurement, all of those pieces through regionalization could leverage resources to help districts, especially small districts, and provide opportunities for students, because that's what it's all about. So that is one of the big initiatives right now that we are exploring. And
What were the
that's
four schools again?
Madison, Morrisville, Hamilton, Stockbridge Valley.
I think I read.
So those are some of the, and there's going to be more about regionalization coming down from NICEAG. We're actually going to host Dr. Madison here in Hamilton on May 2nd. He is the Deputy Senior Commissioner. Regionalization is his responsibility, so we're going to host him in Hamilton and have the opportunity to have conversations with him about what that looks like, so we're excited about that. So let's talk about staffing and where we are right now, and what we have been working on as an administrative team. So we have 4 anticipated teaching faculty vacancies through attrition. One of those positions is very highly specialized, so we don't anticipate any changes or restructuring related to that position. It's just too highly specialized. For the 3 other positions, we believe we could potentially, they could be absorbed through existing faculty who possess new certifications. So out of the 4, we think 3 could be absorbed with dual certifications, potentially. So those are the processes that we're working through internally right now. What does that look like? The potential outcomes. So if you look to the right side of the chart, we could retain all core course offerings. There would be a reduction in the co-teaching model of Regents courses. They would shift from a co-teach to a single teach model. But that does not impact any IEPs. Okay? Responsibilities for social emotional learning initiatives and meetings will be shared amongst the director of PPS, our school psychologists, and counselors. So a shift. There will be potential reduction in middle and high school elective offerings, and there will be middle school support services and exploratory courses that may have to be restructured to align with relevant staff. So those are all pieces of those moving pieces. I've mentioned many times, our staff, when you move one staff member or one assignment, it has a trickle-down effect because our margins are so limited with our staff. We're at that point. That's just where we are. So the schedule and the way staffing works are all intertwined. And Mark can attest to this, or counselors can attest to this, one move could be a trickle to 3 different moves. So it's complicated. But through this process, this is what we've come up with as potential solutions. There could be changes to this, but right now, we think this is where we could land.
And if you're saying that's potential solutions, that's keeping us tax cap compliant, that's not keeping us tax cap compliant, like,
This would get us close.
okay.
It would not put us at tax cap compliance. It would get us close. Closer.
Do we have a figure for what that percentage is?
Matt?
Not specifically. So with personnel costs being the biggest piece, we have unknowns tied to our personnel costs for next year. We are in contract negotiations with both of our bargaining units, both instructional faculty and support staff. I believe right now we are probably in the 1 to 2% over the tax cap compliant range. If you're asking for a number and a range, that's what I would tell you today.
With these changes.
So with our allowable being 4.27%, probably in the 5.5 to 6.5 range, if I had to give you a direct figure.
And I do want to state that some of these changes would be dependent on some contractual obligations and agreement to make changes. So that could affect some of these. Open and honest about that. So that's where we are. We're going to continue to work. We need some direction and conversation. We listen to this conversation as this is a workshop. We'd like to hear your feedback. We have an administrative team here to ask specific questions, provide feedback. We may speak in generalities because we want to protect confidentiality and staffing. Because when you start talking very specific positions, this is a small community and that could, you know who we're on. So I want to be careful with that.
Bill, just follow-up question. So you're saying some of those costs are contingent on the negotiations. In terms of timing of the budget vote coming up, would we know that in time?
Yeah, we have started to have internal conversations, but we're not there yet. But we have had staff conversations.
If I may, Bill, I think, we would, for us to put forth a budget for the board to adopt, it would be at a point where we are comfortable, even if contracts are not settled, that we are comfortable and confident in where they're going and where we're going to be at.
Does this, so last year, we obviously had to make some similar changes and some creative changes to the way that personnel were being used to get us into a fiscally tax cap compliant position. Would these changes, if they were put into effect, give us any sense of security that next year we won't be in the same position again? So there's no more optimism of, well, if we do it this year, maybe next year things could be better.
No, and it's really becoming a challenge with budget. The uncertainty of year to year, what your foundation, especially with the Rockefeller changes, and what will be adopted next year by the governor. Is she going to take some more of those recommendations from the Rockefeller's Institute analysis, and what does that mean for Hamilton? So we could very well be having the same conversation again next year.
And if I remember correctly, I don't see any of those recommendations that would drastically benefit Hamilton in a huge way, right? So we're not.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, there were upwards of 30 recommendations in the report. The extent to which any or all of those are going to be implemented is unknown, and the impact on specific school districts is unknown. I suppose any combination of those recommendations could favor one school district or one type of school district more than another. I think what you're seeing even this year with, as the budget negotiations continue at the state level is, even though these changes were made and seen as favorable, it still left a lot of districts lagging. So they're still talking about the same things they've been talking about for 10 years with hold harmless provisions and minimum aid increases. But again, for us, declining enrollment, increased wealth on a per pupil basis, regardless of what changes to the formula, we know that those two factors are not going to be favorable for significant aid increases. So, it's a challenge.
For this district to continue to offer all that we offer and all that we want to offer, it's costly. And we're getting to the point where we may not be able to continue to offer all we offer on a budget basis. Unfortunately, that is the direction of the state.
So last year, the sense was, we can be creative and we're not going to compromise in what students are offered. This year, it feels like, am I wrong in saying, it feels like this would be a compromise, what we're able to offer to our students, or a reduction of what we're able to offer.
Yeah, we would still be able to retain all of our core offerings, but that has, look, there are some compromises that are going to have to be absorbed.
Could you give some examples of what are the types of, just what are electives and the explorations?
I'll refer to that.
Not asking necessarily which ones would be cut, but what are the ones that exist, just so people get a chance to.
A list of the electives that we have?
Just some examples.
So it's any of the courses that are not part of your traditional sequence leading to graduation. But we have, like, well, in science, you could consider physics an elective, right? It's one of those ones that's a little bit extra. But we have creative writing, journalism, film is lit, in the English department, natural disasters is a science course that is an elective. AP Chem, AP Bio are electives.
Intro to baking.
Intro to baking was one that I was thinking of.
Just any of the courses that are not, any of the courses that are not required for graduation.
Right. Now, there is an elective requirement through New York State, and we would still have enough electives for students to meet that requirement, but the number of offerings could be reduced.
And another concern to consider is, we're looking at long-range course offerings for students with the new graduation pathways. The more electives you eliminate, the less pathway opportunities kids are going to have. Because the whole reasoning behind the new graduation pathways are to give kids options. It could be a Regents track, there could be a CTE track, there could be an arts track to gain enough credits for graduation. So if you continue to eliminate, it's kind of going against the idea of what the state is bidding for in the future.
So Bill, is the thought to eliminate them or just maybe offer them every other year?
There's a potential to offer every year. They could be offered by different staff members. There are options. Some may have to be eliminated.
I have a couple of clarifying questions. Are we saying going above the tax cap, we would still have reductions in these electives?
Correct.
Okay. And then, second clarifying question, the 3 positions that we're losing through attrition,
Mm-hmm.
we're we're going above the tax cap and those are not being replaced.
Correct. That's correct. To replace everything as it is right now, you're looking at a double-digit tax number. So if we were to replace every staff member that we have this year to next year, you're looking at excess of double-digit tax number. So by doing these three positions, you're reducing, you still have to go out over the tax cap, but at a lesser amount.
Could you explain, for those who may not be familiar about the co-teaching model in Regents courses, what that would be?
Scott?
Yeah, so this year we have 11, and they're not all co-teach, some of them are team teach. So we have 11 courses that lead to a Regents exam. So for instance, like English 11, so you have English 9, English 10, which leads to English 11. So all three of those courses would be considered a Regents course. And so in 11 of those classes, which is all of them, plus we have 2 bios that have it. There's either a co-teach, a team teacher, or a TA in there. We've done that to support our students in hopes of having a high graduation rate, success on Regents, and success in those classes, more importantly. So there would be a reduction in those. I mean, the first attempt is going to be to keep either a team or a co-taught in the Regents only courses. So the year they take the Regents. So 11th grade English, 10th grade, help me out here.
That'd be the 5 that they need to
The 5
graduate
Regents.
as well.
So instead of having 11, we're hoping to have 5 classes where that co-teacher team teach is there to support those kids that in getting that passing grade and getting high grades too. So,
Just in the year that they take the Regents?
Yes.
And not the years
Not
before
the
that?
years leading up.
And right now, they have that support the years before?
From 9th grade up, you do.
Okay.
And do you think that model is a big part of our high graduation rate?
We just started it last year, so it's like we're not even able to really feel it out to say whether it's had a big impact or not. It feels like it does, but, our benchmarks or our data collection has to do with passing Regent scores and average Regent scores and students graduating, and so that would take a much longer period of time, I think 3, 4, 5 years before you could really say for sure.
In the past, we have had the ability to offer
Some.
unique situations, depending on the student population, particular courses, a co-teach support or some other model similar to that to help a group of students that, through the conversations
Right.
have been identified as
At risk.
at risk of not passing Regents exam. But this year it was more across the board, we were able to provide that.
I'm sorry if I missed this, but could you say, so it says reduced co-teaching by how much?
We don't quite know yet. It's going to depend on schedules. So we're hoping that we have the 5 core where they take the Regents. Those classes will have either co-teach or team teach. So there's currently 11 classes that it's covered. So you're reducing by 50% or a little more. That, going back to what Mark said, I mean, last year we built this. Previously, we hadn't had that much support, not even close to that much support. We've had classes here and there where we've had a large group of kids that were at risk. We tried to put another teacher in that room with them. It was kind of here and there, whatever we could. And last year, we restructured some things to cover every class. So that would be reduced.
Bill, for the positions that are going to be potentially absorbed through the existing faculty, we might have talked a little bit about this, but can you talk a little bit about, we did some of that last year, And can you talk a little bit about how that has worked out for the teachers who are having to learn how to teach different, or things outside of their discipline, and whether, what their feedback is on that? Because we don't want the, just thinking about teacher loads.
It's been difficult, to learn a new, but we've provided support, training, and from all accounts, it's gone well.
Okay.
I think, I don't think there's been any huge roadblocks.
Okay.
I think the services provided are leading to student outcomes that we expect.
And that would be something that would be supported by the school, for example, over the summer, if they
Yes.
know that they're getting a new course that they need to
Yes.
teach, so that they could prepare adequately.
So we have professional development hours built into the contract. So we would prioritize the teachers that we are asking to take on a different responsibility. We would provide those resources so they are able to go trained. For instance, we would have two math teachers who would have to go to AP training in the summer to teach AP courses.
I see.
So they're already looking into that registration and those programs, so we would provide that for them.
Other questions?
Um,
Just see everybody staring in one direction, so go ahead.
It's pretty sombery.
I know.
Sorry, I'm asking all the questions.
Fine.
Has your team considered, so we're saying, not replacing the 3 positions, and this is sort of one option. But we're looking at, it's either this or something else. Has your team considered, what would this look like if we replace one of them or 2 of them?
So what it would look like is increase tax levy higher than what we are right now. And then we would just continue the programming that we have identified here. For instance, if we didn't replace one of our elementary positions, like what would that look like? We would have to figure that out. But we have not mapped that out yet. We're trying to get as close to tax cap compliance as we possibly could, and this is where we come up. For every position that we don't replace, tax levy goes up.
Is the audience allowed to ask clarifying questions or not?
Unfortunately, no. We have budget coffees coming up that you can ask.
I have to remember.
If you give us your information, we'll send it to you.
Now, if we
I
were,
think I said that when for every position we do replace,
Yeah.
the tax levy goes up. Sorry.
if we were purely looking at what would be the best in terms of educational value, would we replace those 3 positions?
Would we say that?
Would we replace those 3 positions? All we cared about was what's going to be the best for the education of the kids here. And we weren't looking at numbers. We want to replace those 3.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's efficiencies that we need to address. We can address those. But as a school that offers what we offer, this community wants a school to continue to offer any reduction is a reduction, right? It doesn't, it's not what we want. And we'd love to retain everything.
And we talked about regionalization and the potential there for cost savings. That's how soon would those cost savings potentially be realized? Not next year.
Not,
No,
no.
So
probably not the year
like
after that.
3-4 years
Yeah.
just to get those going.
Absolutely, yeah. Because there's logistics that needs to be worked out.
Right.
For that to happen.
A lot of them.
That's further down the
It's a
road.
long meeting, definitely.
Yes.
It's definitely more of a long-term,
Yeah, yeah.
both from an operational standpoint and a fiscal. And the fiscal impact
probably would not be directly correlated to when program changes take effect. It would probably be down the road further.
But if we have reductions in our electives and potentially AP courses over the next few years, that just puts us in a worse position to be involved in that regionalization, is that correct?
Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, the main goal of regionalization isn't so much cost savings for districts, it's more about.
There's a caveat that it could save districts, but it's really about that it could save districts. But it's really about opportunity.
But it's not the
access.
primary.
It's not the primary. The primary is having kids have the opportunity and access on an equitable point of view. That's what it's all about.
Mr. Dawson, am I correct in saying that with this plan, you might have teachers teaching more classes than they were this year?
Different.
Maybe one, but there's contractual obligations that we have to abide by. So they would not be teaching outside of their contractual obligations.
And is that something that we could sustain throughout the next couple of years, or is it something that we might try and get another teacher to take some of the load off curriculum?
Well, that all depends on future budgets. You know, if we had the opportunity, if there was a revenue wave, then potentially we could add that. But once you lose a position, it's very difficult to make that happen, especially with the fiscal year.
I think that's a very good question and an interesting point because through attrition, our number of teachers have been being reduced for a long period of time now. We haven't ever really, in recent history, haven't had a chance to hire back a teacher, right?
Only through the use of special funding.
But we also have not had to do layoffs as other schools have,
That's correct.
which has put us in another unique and positive place, right? And we're not talking about that right now. But
We've been able to stem the tide for many years,
Right.
where other districts, this hit much sooner than it has hit us.
well, and reading the articles that come out, and we had digests of articles, and in those digests, you're seeing it hitting a lot more now too. So,
You know, that's the work of that gentleman sitting right there, and the administrators sitting at this table, that they have been creative and exploring every opportunity to stem that tide and keep staffing and only change programming through attrition. That we have not had to reduce or lay off staff where other districts have.
and a testament to our teachers who've had to take those positions and changes as they come.
Yeah, and it's been a testament to our faculty who's dual certified, with a lot of flexibility and have been accommodating. But, you know, we're at the point where, as I said earlier, our staffing margins are so thin, it's becoming more and more difficult.
And as a small school, we aren't able to take on these big changes on the fly like other bigger schools are able to. And bigger schools know they're gonna have X number of retirements every year. We don't know that, you know, so it makes long-term planning virtually impossible beyond 1 year. You know, we really don't know until February of an existing school year what opportunities you're going to have even through attrition. So when we start the conversations in January, it's very different. But I think I used the example of, you know, in the elementary in Heather's building, we have 2 sections. And there's this general feeling at the state level and that if your enrollment's dropping, you don't need as much staffing. Well, we have 2 sections in the elementary. You lose 20% of the grade level, it doesn't mean you're going down to 1 section. So in a smaller school districts, you're working on those margins and you know, 1 student with special needs can have a huge impact on staffing, allocating resources, and then in a fiscal manner as well. So
important too to know that sometimes it's advantageous to have an internal transfer that is dual certified, because we have found through some recent searches that the candidate pool is not to the expectations of our hiring protocols. And if we have somebody who internally was dual certified that we think is a better candidate than what we could attract from the outside, we're gonna consider that. And that's been the case recently with some of our searches.
Last year, when we did this, and we're looking at a big loss, and, you know, teachers and staff stepped up, and I know you guys did a lot of work last year to, you know, find efficiencies. I feel like every year we're challenged to find efficiencies year after year after year. And, you know, I commend you guys, but at the same time, that can't be a linear trend. It's not sustainable. You're saying we're pretty lean at this moment. Margins are very, very thin. And we're looking at a loss one way or another. Last year, I mean, we came together and did this exercise, and we still lost the full-time pre-K program. I just talked to a parent who said, you know,
We didn't have full-time.
one parent.
Wait, we didn't have full-time, never.
We've never had full-day pre-K.
It was a reduction, wasn't it?
Two sections.
Two sections.
Two sections, in one section.
Okay.
Lost that.
Okay. Yeah.
It was not budgetary.
That was not budgetary?
It was not, nope.
We didn't have numbers, right?
We have
Didn't have
numbers, yeah, we only have 18, we don't have a lottery anymore, so we're able to serve those registered with one section.
Okay.
But that staff member was repurposed
Yeah,
because she was certified,
yeah.
became dual certified, which allowed us to provide extra services that we may have lost.
Well, and maybe that's not the best example, you know, and there are much more from last year, but the point that I wanted to get to was the trickle-down effect that you're talking about. If we're looking at a loss, any way we see this, are we open to looking at some other options outside of this instead of losing all three positions? And I don't say that lightly. And I understand the implications of raising the tax levy. And, you know, as a board, we've talked about this. Every year we think about this. But when we do the budget work, when we consider the budget, you know, you guys do advocacy work. We're, you know, constantly looking for funds and you know, advocating for, you know, greater funds to come from the state and the government. But for us to come together like this, at the end of the day, the money is really not coming from anywhere else. And what we're talking about is how do we fund the school and the budget so that we can, you know, support the teachers and the students. So I just want to sort of get a feel from you guys, and if there's any interest in looking at some additional options outside of this.
Am I interested?
I'm absolutely interested.
Yes.
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 Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always a bit of a risk. I mean, Matt can probably explain it a lot better than me about overriding a tax. Yeah, I think keeping everything great, if possible.
I'm not even talking about keeping everything, because really, when we're talking about, keeping everything the same as last year, really, it's not the same as the year before or the year before that. Right? And I really appreciate this exercise of finding efficiencies, and I'm on board with that. What we're saying is that even if we're going above the tax cap, we're looking at these losses, and we're not able to replace the three positions. What I'm asking is, what would it look like if we say, like, 1 to 2, replace one of them? Would that ease the burden on the teachers?
Yes, absolutely. And that's particular to each different position, what that would look like, because of those trickle downs. If we say we're gonna retain teacher A, that could look different than if we retained teacher B, because of all of the trickle downs that could have an effect on their offerings, what they do. But yes, we're very much open to that.
So, in order for them to be open to that, it's up to us as a board to decide between the 1 and, sorry, I need my notes, between the 1 and 2% override, as it looks at this grim moment, and the 10-something override that we mentioned, if we were to fill all of it.
Or something in between, I think is.
Right, so
maybe it's
what is that, what the district needs to hear from the board is what is our comfort level if we're already exceeding 1 to 2%. In the past, we've said we're not sure we want to go double digits. Where are we in that range, so that if we say, I'm just picking a number, if we say 5, then they can do their math and their work to figure out what that means, right? And so that's what we need to discuss is where do we want them to land? Do we want them to stay at 1 to 2? Because if they do, this is what it looks like, right? If we want to go 5, 6, if we want to go 6, 8, right? So what does that look like? Because without our direction as a board, they can't work on those pieces as you suggest.
So I can just, thank you for that, that's helpful. And the team knows this. Not every FTE is the same, right? So Bill talked about how each FTE is unique in the effect that it has on other programs, other people, number of students, age of the students. That's for them to worry about. But also, every FTE is different as far as the fiscal impact, right? It's not an FTE that's leaving the district voluntarily is different than an FTE that's retiring, because there's post-employment benefits tied to that. So that's why it's difficult for us to talk about, well, how much would it cost if you add one more back in? It depends which one it is. But
We're usually not talking about individual positions, right?
Correct.
correct, yeah. And frankly, even if you set a position, I wouldn't be able to answer it. And the first examination would be by the team to look at the program impact and the impact that kids first. That always comes first. But you're looking at least 1% of the tax levy for every FTE. So I don't know if that's helpful to you folks as far as considering. So it's $87,000 is 1% of the tax levy. So every FTE is in excess of that amount. So when you look at it inclusively, so I don't know if that helps.
So with this proposal now, our tax cap right now is 4.27.
Correct.
So,
That's not going to change.
right.
Yep.
But this package as it is now, we're already over the tax cap.
Correct.
We're at like between 5 and 6.
No, I would say between 5.5 and 7. I would
Okay.
say,
With this.
yeah, probably 1 to 2%.
So to your point, Michelle, if we were to say, okay, we want to go to 8% over, you know, then does that get
Then
us
you're
one
probably
more
talking,
person? And then what does that
person.
mean?
Yep. Yep.
So, the way I see it, it doesn't seem anywhere possible that the district could survive below what is already here. Or survives maybe a strong word. It wouldn't be able to function at the same level that the community expects and deserves, and our students deserve. And the fear of going above the tax cap is always that it'll be voted down. I think often we fear that voting down is because people don't want to pay more taxes. I think we also have to consider the fear that people will vote it down if we're not giving enough programming, and if the budget's not high enough. And I think if we go somewhere in the middle, we don't know where that is. If the budget and the tax cap proposal is set to meet our expectations and what our community wants, what we think the community wants for schools at the highest level, and that gets voted down, then we know we need to go down. If we're too low, or we're in the middle, we don't know. Do people think we need to keep going down, or do they want us to go up? Right? And we can kind of glean from those who participate, but we know that more people vote than come to our meetings and comment, right? And it's hard to get just from those people who write emails or come to meetings a good sense of what the community wants. My strong feeling is that this community overwhelmingly values education, and that the hard work that all of you did last year and the hard work that teachers are doing this year to make a budget work. It was tax cap compliant, and used a lot of creative and ways to create efficiencies. They'll understand that if we want this to not be the norm going forward, that this is a school that's always scraping by and always looking to save money, even if it reduces what students are offered, that's not what this community wants, and that's not what they value, and that's not how they value education. So my strong opinion is that we only know what the community wants if we ask for what the school needs, not based on the finances, but based on what is educationally, what is pedagogically sound, what is going to make the school meet the expectations that we have for education in our community. And if they don't want that, voters don't want that, then we can see, okay, what can we reduce to get to a place where we think voters will feel comfortable with that. And I don't know how we get that question answered any other way than that.
I think that's the only way to get that question answered.
Jen, you're quiet.
Pondering. I also know that there's a reality of rising costs in every single thing right now. And I think that going into double digits is going to be crippling to some members in our community as well. And that's why I'm struggling to find this balance, again, to make sure that our students have what they need, our community has what they need, considering our community as a whole. And that's why I'm just, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about, just a little bit about the process? If we do, go out really high and it gets
Sure.
shot down?
Yep.
Then what happens?
Yeah, so everything is based off of May 20th, which is the third Tuesday of May for every public school district in New York State. So that's the day of the annual meeting, the annual vote. If a budget is not approved, is not voted yes, regardless of if it's an override, regardless of what the circumstances are surrounding the budget, The district has options. The most common thing that districts do is you can do a revote. And that takes place basically a month later. And you basically just redo the whole process that you did leading up to May 20th, just kind of a shotgun with 1 month. You have another budget hearing, and you have options. You can put the same budget up for vote. So the other thing, this is sort of a technicality, but when you vote, you're voting on the budget. You're not voting on a tax levy. So you're voting on a budget with that tax levy that's needed for that budget. So you can go out with a higher spending plan, lower tax levy, there can be moving parts, but you go out at a revote. If you're not successful with the revote, you go to contingency. And what contingency means in New York State for public school districts is a 0% increase in your tax levy. That's when it becomes.
That would be
That's
That would be very bad.
So, that would be, if you went out at, I'm just picking a number, if you went out at 8, and roughly speaking, that's an increase of, let's say, $700,000, and it's voted down, you don't go back to 4.27, you go back to 0, so that's, now you gotta cut that much, so. But,
If
you
you
know,
go,
Second vote.
to the second vote. You have the option to go to contingency after the first vote, but I don't know of any districts that do that. If they are voted down, they go to a second vote.
if you go over tax cap compliant, what do you need for the vote?
You have to have a 60% supermajority approval rate on the vote.
And what does that mean?
It means 60% or more of the people that vote have to vote yes.
That can vote or that do vote?
That do vote. That do
Okay.
vote, yep. And if you're tax cap compliant, you just need a simple 50% plus one.
Okay. I didn't know if it was,
Yeah.
I didn't remember if it was that do vote or that could vote, because that would be a big difference, right? Like, there are people that don't vote.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so if
and
that
remember,
factored in would be a
you-
problem.
That number's, you don't have to be a registered voter to vote in the school annual election, so it's really that the number of eligible voters is really
Okay.
probably you can figure out roughly, but, yep, it's of those that
Got
do
it.
vote, yep.
I would like to ask Colin, as a student who experiences this on a day-to-day basis, what do you live this? This is we are preparing you for life outside of MCS. What does this mean?
I think, I've seen some of the teachers filling multiple roles that, growing up through elementary, middle school, I hadn't seen before, and it was kind of new to me. And I think, in general, they've done a great job at offering these things that potentially were on the chopping block. So I do have an appreciation for what the teachers are doing. Now, I also appreciate how we have all these AP classes that I've been able to take advantage of, that I really don't want to see go for the classes after me. So it is, I feel like, the position of maybe kind of going in the middle somewhere where we could be not super high in the tax levy, but also maybe maintain one position that was going to be out on attrition, or somewhere in the middle there could be a good option that I think you could pitch that to the community and people would support that. But I think both ways, where teachers coming in or teachers filling spots that were out from attrition, I've seen that be successful as a student both ways. So I think just finding something in the middle is definitely a smart idea.
Thank you.
Can you talk just for 1 sec about how your scheduling works in terms of electives that, like Jen mentioned earlier, maybe are offered every other year? Would it just take a lot more planning on your part with the counselors to make sure that you can fit, like if you want to take, AP chemistry or something, to fit that into your schedule, you just have to plan for that way in advance. Maybe this is a question for you, Mark, too. So,
Yeah,
so that you can still take all of the electives that you want to take. It's just you might have to, it's trickier scheduling wise.
trickier scheduling, so, you know, you do, a lot of schools do, you know, odd year expect this class, even years you're expecting this class. That, for the student, would require the long-term planning. But a school our size as well has so many singletons that the schedule itself kind of sometimes can make that very difficult for the student. So even if the student had the long-term plan, ninth grade, this is my plan, you know, I'm going to be doing this, this, and this, it's possible there could be disruptions because, okay, you wanted to do AP Bio and you wanted to do band. But they had to meet the same period. Because what we try to do is find that spot
It's usually one
that
section.
accommodates the most students.
Well, and I feel our students are already up against that challenge. If they choose to go to BOCES, they can't do band, chorus, orchestra, or foreign language. So it's, again, those are like choices that I feel like they are already making when it comes to a lot of that as well.
So it's probably not in the best interest to have to make even more of those difficult choices if we can avoid it.
What I've seen kind of in general is the counseling office has been really helpful with me trying to get into electives that kind of follow more of like a core class, like the AP Sciences. That's been a little easier than getting into some of the electives that don't follow core class, like ag mechanics was, I tried to get in a little difficult because I think some of those AP classes kind of get prioritized over that. And so I think even with kind of a drop in electives, I think as a student, I would still expect to see that some of those electives that follow a more traditional core class might still be prioritized.
Thank you.
Just back to all of you, Colin, thank you. I know that's not easy to be put on the spot, but you did a great job, and to hear it come from you is helpful. Corey, Jen, you know, all of you. You know, with regard to overriding the tax cap, on Tuesday when we have these budget coffees, and then ultimately when we adopt this budget, if that's the route we're going to go, we will be prepared and I think it's important to know that we are prepared that if we make that recommendation, that we're going to make a compelling case, and people are going to know why we're doing it. You know, it's not because it's the easy thing to do. It's not because we think it's going to pass, so let's do it. I have all sorts of data, regionally, community, you know, specific to this community that if we make that recommendation, then we will certainly share, and it'll be major points of emphasis as we go through this process to be successful in that way. So,
Having that direction will help us with our message.
and we are, yeah, and our team's heard me say this number, you know, we are stewards of public funds, and we take that very seriously. They do, they have to, and they're in the room with me, so we know that, we understand that, so it's not something we take lightly. And as I said before, it's not something we ever rule out, but it's not something that we just decide that we're gonna do because we can. So, historically, I think we have more than enough information to show that we've been fiscally responsible. We have even more than that to show how great this place is and what our kids are doing, people like Colin, why they're as successful as they are, and when you put that all together, that's what it's all about. So again, the famous, I feel like I always say, we'll get there. It's my famous last words, right? And we will. How? I don't know.
So on that,
We're gonna get there.
so on that note, what's next are the budget coffees, right?
Yep.
Tuesday, the 8th, we've got two.
Oh, that's me, sorry.
Okay. We've got two coming up, one at 9 a.m. and one at 5 p.m. on the 8th, both of them. After those two meetings, two coffees, the team will fine-tune the budget. And then on Wednesday, April 16th, is a board meeting with potential budget adoption. And then May 13th, there's a budget hearing. And then the vote, again, is May 20th. So those are the things that come up in the next couple of weeks regarding the budget. And I think, do you need anything, anybody else have?
Just outside of this, obviously welcoming emails, messages
Yeah.
from the community as well.
I would encourage people, if you can make it on the 8th, our budget coffees are the best opportunity to provide feedback. It's not done in a formal setting. We actually have coffee and treats. We sit in a circle. What's that?
Coffee at 5 p.m. at
Oh,
night.
yeah. Never too late. And tea.
And water.
But it really is the best time, we think, for people to provide feedback. We try to make it comfortable. It's not a formal board setting. And that's really the time, I think, where we get our best feedback and have real productive conversations, so.
So I guess the last piece of this is to go back to where Corey was in the meeting expectations, go big or go home. I'm just going to shorten it to that. To understanding Jen's concern of crippling some of our community depending on where we land, the potential of that, and all the concerns that the rest of us have brought up in there. So as a board, we need to give direction. Like, that's what we need to do tonight. So we need to give them some sort of, are we going big or go home? We want to see what that looks like before Wednesday, April 16th, or do we want to be somewhere in the middle of that and where we are here?
We can also have options. We can, you're ultimately going to adopt a budget, but it's not out of the ordinary for us to present with you multiple options on that night, and with details of.
So maybe that's it. Maybe this is option 1, which not in any particular order of goodness, of course. Option 2 would be somewhere in the middle, and then option 3 is go big or go home, and so we can see what that looks like. Is that enough direction for you guys?
Yeah. I think so.
Is that fair for, speaking for all of us on the board? Okay. I just want to reiterate the fact that these conversations are not fun. They're not fun for you guys in Bill's office on a regular basis. I know you speak often. They're not fun for us. They're not fun for the community. And none of us take it lightly. And so I thank the teachers, the staff of the school, and especially those of you at the table, for the time and energy you put into making our kids be number 1. And so every decision you make is about the students, and that's what matters. We do have to care about where our families land when it comes at the end of the day as well, because again, that's our students. But the work you have to put into this, I know, is difficult. It's difficult for teachers to walk through the building wondering, and for you guys to walk by them and think, just had a conversation and I didn't like that one, and even sitting here tonight, and thank the community for being a partner in these budget coffees. It's been nice to have participation this year. We had some last year, but seeing more participation every year has been really wonderful. And I think that's it for tonight. Do we need an executive session? I don't believe we do. So I need a motion to adjourn the regular meeting. 7:20. All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
for coming.